Elden Ring's DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, finally has a gameplay trailer. The Halloween can adjourn. There's a lot to talk about in not only this trailer, but in 3 interviews with Miyazaki that dropped at the same time, plus Bandai Namco's press release. So in this video, I'm going to try to put everything together and formulate a few main takeaways we can feel confident in. I basically want to bring everything together in this one video, both trailer and all the supplementary information. So getting right into it, the main takeaways can be split up into lore and mechanics. On the mechanics side, there are over 10 new boss fights, there are 8 new weapon categories, in addition to the new weapons and spells that are going in the already existing categories. It is the largest expansion FromSoftware has ever done at $40, and it has a similar open world design to the base game, but there are some changes. You can access it through Miquella's arm in Mohg's arena, and lastly, there will be a poison swamp. And on the lore side of things, the marketing focal point is Mesmer the Impaled, but the story focus seems to be on Miquella. In the DLC, we will be following Miquella's steps and learning about Marika's past actions, possibly what she did to become a god. Its setting, which is the Land of Shadow, is not in the past, it's in the current time, but it features a pre-existing land, culture, or society, one that predated the Erdtree. Lastly, there are lots of elements of blackness throughout the trailer, likely something about Godwyn or Deathroot considering what we saw before the trailer and the connection between Miquella and Godwyn. With those stated, let's get into what support each one has in the gameplay trailer and in the interviews. I'm Mad Luigi. I apologize if my voice sounds a bit sick, because I am sick, but I hope you enjoy it nonetheless. So firstly, going through the mechanic takeaways, the bosses are probably one of the things we can actually talk about the most. The interviews say that there will be more than 10 new boss fights, which I interpret to just mean 11 new bosses, otherwise they would say more than 11 new boss fights if there were more. Maybe it just means 10 unique bosses and more bosses being reused, but either way, 10 or 11 new unique bosses is a safe bet. And we get to see a few of them in the trailer. Obviously, Mesmer is one, being a focal point of the DLC like past bosses such as Artorias or Gale in Dark Souls 3, but I'll wait to talk more about him specifically until we get to the lore section. A second boss is the giant flaming Wickerman. We can see the bodies of people put into the cage and set on fire within the cage or boss body, and in the IGN interview, Miyazaki says that this was used as a weapon in a war that occurred in the Land of Shadow. Again, that's the name for where the DLC takes place. The flaming giant has a sun crest on it with what could be omen-like horns protruding from it, either that or just the sun rays. A third boss is the Deformed Lion creature, which definitely has some omen horns or something like them sprouting from it. In an auto-translation of the Famitsu article, Miyazaki said that this lion is a character derived from a culture that existed before the Erdtree. This is consistent with it having the growths which we saw in an earlier video of mine are tied to the Crucible, something else which predated the Erdtree, and we'll talk about this one more later too. We don't have any more confirmed bosses to my knowledge, but some potential other ones include the Red Dancing Fighter, which we find juxtaposed in a sea of blue flowers, possibly a reverse of the Blue Swordsman who sealed the Red Rot in the Lands Between. We have a gravity-wielding Boar Rider and a monster hippo. Both could be bosses or just big enemies. The hippo exhibits another aspect of the Crucible attack, furthering the connection to the predating culture or society. There's a few aspects of the Crucible stuff in this trailer. And then there's this skeleton horse rider. The wide open arena definitely reads to me as a boss arena, so I'm pretty confident that this is going to be one of the main 10-11 bosses as well. But there's not much more info on this one other than the decaying backside of the horse and the black orb face with 2 blue eyes. This could be a connection to Deathroot, Blight, Those Who Live in Death, especially with the skeleton, but it's hard to immediately tell, and I don't think it was touched on in any of the interviews. There is also this Impaled Man who is likely an important NPC and or boss. He is the same as the one who is shown in the painting earlier in the trailer. Notice the matching brooch. And with this cinematic, he reads as boss-like to me. But what is impaling him? Is it a shard of a tree, some mix of tree and bone? It seems to have some level of golden or glow to it as well, so plenty to unpack here. Now, we get near to the end of the trailer and end the boss run with a look at the boss fight with Mesmer, getting to see another Crucible incantation that the player gets to use, and the trailer finishing with a shot of Mika. Obviously a potential to feature in some boss fight, but I'd wager that this seems like an aspect of Mika that doesn't fight with us. He speaks in the trailer a bit, and his words seem like that of an ally more than an antagonist like Mesmer. And one last note, Miyazaki said that there was an optional boss or bosses which should deliver a similar experience to Melania. So Mesmer is probably a necessary boss. That means we could get a boss that is optional but really significant both in challenge and thematics outside of him. Definitely something to be excited for. So that handles the bosses. The only other mechanic that has some more room to explain is the new 8 weapon categories. Miyazaki confirms this number in the articles. There will be more weapons and spells in general, but these categories will be wholly new kinds of weapons. We get to see some of these in the trailer, which likely include the hand-to-hand or hand-to-foot combat weapons, shields that can be utilized for attack as well as defense, throwing daggers which already exist in-game, but maybe this is a primary weapon version, and I would guess that this giant explosive throwing may also count as a new category of weapon. Beyond the weapons, this has been confirmed to be the largest expansion FromSoftware has ever made, which is what we expected. It will be $40, and it has had the longest development time of any DLC they have produced, potentially over 2 years. In the articles, Miyazaki confirmed that the Land of Shadows will be a separate zone from the base game that can be traveled to and fro at any time, but that the overall design will work similarly. This means an open world to traverse around on Torrent, complemented by legacy dungeons and smaller caves or catacombs or things like that. Miyazaki did say in the Eurogamer article that they experimented with something a little more in between the legacy dungeons and open fields. So we should be seeing something new in the mix, straddling the thresholds between field and dungeon we got used to in the base game, maybe providing for more seamless traversal or transition between the major zones. The trailer basically tells us that the cocoon in Mohg's arena is how we will access the DLC, and Miyazaki also confirmed this in the interviews. Players will be able to access the DLC at any point in the base game and will be able to go back and forth between as they wish. So, Mohg will have to be defeated to get to the DLC since you can't access the cocoon before beating Mohg. That's his boss arena, but that's it. In the interviews, Miyazaki has said that the DLC will feature some new mechanic to somewhat adjust the power level of things. He said kind of like Sekiro's attack power, but it's a bit unclear, especially if it's going to be a 1-to-1 to something like that. I'll likely be going into the DLC with a late game build that hasn't beaten every endgame boss, but has a fairly developed build and kit, so I can get the most out of the interactions in the DLC. But I'm sure afterwards I'll try it early, later, mid, and Miyazaki has said that we have the option to do that. And lastly, on the mechanics, we do have a poison swamp confirmed. Miyazaki actually had an interesting note on it, saying, "It was only after creating the base game that I realized I really like to create poison swamps." I'm surprised if it was only after the base game of Elden Ring he realized that. And this was a little place of introspection and reflection for me. So maybe when players reach the poison swamp in the DLC, they will feel a little bit of this retrospection. So we'll see if we feel retrospection instead of just dread when we get to this poison swamp. So that concludes the mechanics. Now on to lore and story implications. It is clear that the focus is on Mesmer the Impaler, from the trailer to the marketing to the collector's edition and helmet. He will be a core boss fight as we see a bit of in the trailer, and Miyazaki has said his throne is similar to the ones of the other demigods. He is supposed to be on their level of power and importance, and we're going to find out why we didn't hear about him in the main game. So he could be another somehow forgotten or spurned child, such as of Radagon and Marika, or he could be some split form of Mika, some aspect of Mika, or something else unknown. Chances are, though, I would say there's some family connection. With his spear and snake imagery, Quelaag, another creator and lore goat who has a great lore dive on the trailer as well, mentioned that he is very Longinus coded. Longinus being the Roman soldier who speared Jesus in the side to make sure he was dead, an important figure in Christian mythology which obviously plays a big role in Elden Ring. Marika was presented as a very crucified Christ-like image with a spear in her side, and being crucified. So Mesmer being an impaler could have been the one to impale Marika, or at least be related to it or symbolically referenced to it. He definitely impaled someone or something to get his name, kind of like Godric getting his grafted name. Or maybe he just did a lot of impaling in war, like his namesake. Either way, there was obviously some impaling going on. He features a not only deep red, but also black flame, which signifies more connection to Deathroot or some aspect of death to me, which could play into the Miquella-Godwyn connection. We should definitely expect something of this kind, since Miquella is the other focal point to the DLC. We enter by touching his arm, he talks to us in the trailer saying he will be following us shortly. Miyazaki confirmed that he is the one in the original teaser image, and Miyazaki has also said that the DLC is about following in the footsteps of Miquella through the Land of Shadow. My reading is that we are on Miquella's side somewhat, but obviously Mezmer stands against us. So either he stands against Miquella too, or is something of a guard. That's assuming we are with Miquella though, which hasn't been confirmed, but still seems likely, especially since, as I'll talk about later, Miquella views us as an expected lord. Also to note, Mezmer has one eye closed, like Melina and Ranni, furthering the familial connection, but also adding to the mystery, since those are two characters obviously shrouded well in mystery that we don't know everything about. The snake motif connects him to Rykard, and his red hair connects to plenty of the kids and Radagon. So with all that, he basically has to be family of some kind, especially in the tradition of all the kids being named with M or R. And a bit more on the family side, Miyazaki said that the DLC will be about following Miquella's footsteps and also learning about Marika's past actions, possibly such as what led her to become a god. Marika's story is finished in the base game, and Miyazaki confirmed that we won't be getting a new ending to the base game, but we don't know much of the specifics about Marika's beginnings or her motivations for actions. So this will give us a great chance to learn. The Bandai Namco press release says that the Land of Shadow is where the goddess Marika first set foot, so it could be either where she originated from or where she began her journey to godhood. It also says that this is where Miquella went and now waits, divesting himself of all his flesh, strength, and lineage, where he now awaits the return of his promised lord, which is likely us. We become the lord in the end of the game after all. Plus, Mezmer is likely referring to us as a potential lord in his trailer dialogue. I think this all supports the on Miquella's team idea, and it confirms, or I guess refutes, another speculation about the DLC. All this talk indicates that the DLC takes place in the current time or present of the Lands Between that we play in, and Miyazaki confirms this, that there are elements of the old past society in the Land of Shadow, but we aren't going back in time. We are going to see Miquella as he is now, and learn about what Marika did in the past. He said we'll learn about this like we learned about the Shattering War in the base game, so very much as a past event, not that we're going there, but we'll learn about what happened with Marika and her ascent to godhood. And as a final, larger point, I think we get a lot of clues in the trailer about black forces of death. From Mezmer's flame, to the skeleton boss, to the dark and shadow-themed tree, plus more hints on the edges of what we're shown, and the veils covering everything, we have a lot of potential connection to the world and themes of Godwyn, Deathroot, and Black Decay. Miyazaki also said concerning the Super Leech worm enemy that there is a connection between these enemies, the way that they are, and the Land of Shadow itself. It sounds to me like the land is corrupting or influencing the creatures through its shadow or darkness, leading them to be the way they are. With the connections we have seen between Miquella and Godwyn, I think there is still good reason to believe that Godwyn will serve some role or influence in this DLC. Maybe we can still hope for a Godwyn-esque boss fight as the optional one, who knows. I could of course keep going and go more in depth into all the smaller aspects, but in terms of large conclusions to be immediately drawn from the trailer and articles putting it all together, I think we have a good list here. I wanted to present an overall or comprehensive review of all the info we have, since a lot of trailer analysis has been more in-depth and separate from the articles. And I think I've achieved that goal, so I'll save deeper dives into the trailer and more crazy speculation to future videos. So feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of that. We have a lot of time until the DLC comes out, so a lot of time for that. And feel free to let me know in the comments what you are most looking forward to about the DLC. So, thank you for watching, thanks to my patrons for your support, peace.